VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And welcome to Crosstalk here on the VCY America Network. My name is Jim Schneider. We thank you for tuning in today. Yesterday, folks, we looked at the impact of the 2012 election on LGBT-related issues. And in a sense, we're going to be taking kind of a look at a similar scenario, though, but a look here at this election as it relates to climate control, as it relates to global warming legislation. We're going to be taking a look at a number of issues today, and we're going to welcome back our guest, Brian Sussman, who served for many years as a meteorologist in the San Francisco Bay Area. He received honors from the Associated Press, the Radio and TV News Directors Association, and others, but left the field to join the arena of conservative talk radio. He is the author of Climategate, a veteran meteorologist exposes a global warming scam, and Eco-Tyranny, How the Left's Green Agenda Will Dismantle America. Brian, thanks for joining us today on Crosstalk.
Jim, always a pleasure to be with you and speak with your audience.
We've got just a myriad of issues to talk about today, including Hurricane Sandy, the impact of a second term for Barack Obama on a push toward this global warming legislation, carbon taxes, and something called ecocide. But let's begin with Hurricane Sandy. Its devastating impact upon our country. Brian, it took a few days, but former Vice President Al Gore pinned the blame for this hurricane on human-induced climate change. Tell us the story.
Well, it's amazing because, it's not amazing. I predicted this as Hurricane Sandy was slamming into the northeastern United States. I wrote on my blog, okay, it's just going to be a matter of time before Al Gore steps up and blames this one on mankind's burning of fossil fuels. And sure enough, a few days later, he went ahead and did just that. And he even went so far as to say Hurricane Sandy was strengthened by climate change. Now, let's just, Jim, if there's somebody listening who says, well, of course, I believe in climate change. I believe in global warming. Okay, if that's true, can I just tell you, there's not one meteorologist on the planet who would somehow try to connect global warming or climate change to hurricane frequency, intensity, or severity. That's just not going to happen. And I can prove that by saying the last several directors of the National Hurricane Center down in Florida. I mean, these are the guys and gals who they forecast the biggest storms on Earth. And I'll tell you why hurricanes are necessary in just a moment. But they forecast these storms. The last several directors of the National Hurricane Center, not only do they think there is no connection whatsoever between climate change, global warming, and hurricanes, but these are people who don't even believe in anthropogenic or man-caused climate change or global warming. So, these are some of the top minds in all of atmospheric science who are complete deniers that humans are contributing to global warming or climate change. So that's the first part that Al gets wrong. The other thing that he was talking about is this whole idea that somehow hurricanes become stronger because the waters in the Pacific and Atlantic are warmer because of human-induced climate change. They're no warmer than normal. And by the way, may I just add, hurricanes need warm water in order to just simply form. The water has to be at least 82 degrees before a hurricane can form, and the warmer the water does not necessarily mean the stronger the hurricane. And I will also just mention one more little tidbit as I throw a bunch of stuff out there, Jim, and that is, this is well documented. When there are bona fide times of warming on the planet, and it usually happens in about 27-year cycles, when there are times of bona fide warming on the planet, there seems to be a decrease in the number of hurricanes. And when there's bona fide cooling on the planet, there seems to be a notable increase in hurricanes on the planet. So much for Al Gore's cries to blame this one on you and me.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, he said we are altering the environment in which all storms develop. I mean, do we have that power? Do we have the authority with our carbon emissions?
None of us likes pollution of any kind. Clean air and clean water is what we all desire. I just to wear my faith in my shirt sleeve, I believe God put this planet together in a very resilient manner. Mm-hmm. I don't think we really have the capability to destroy the planet the way so many environmentalists and politicians want to make you believe, including Al Gore, who is both a politician and an environmentalist. Because when you look at the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which is that's the bogeyman these days. When you look at the amount of carbon dioxide, Jim, It's 38 one-thousandths of 1% of the atmosphere. Of all the atmospheric gases, carbon dioxide is 38 one-thousandths of 1%. That's it. Now, this used to be on the EPA's website, but it no longer is there. Humankind's contribution to that 38 one-thousandths of 1% is 3%. So 3% of 38 one-thousandths of 1%, that's a tiny number. I can't even envision a number that small. But that's how much humans are influencing the amount of carbon dioxide in the air. So again, this is a game they're playing with us to make it to make oil, natural gas, coal, to turn these into evil entities when in fact they're natural resources that are plentiful that God's given this planet for our survival.
So what causes hurricanes, Brian? And you mentioned earlier that you said that hurricanes are necessary. So what causes them and why are they necessary?
Hurricanes are, they're dangerous. Okay, I understand that. They're deadly. I get that. The deadliest hurricane on record in the United States occurred in 1900 when no one was talking about global warming. That was in Galveston, Texas. 8,000 people died. Okay, I understand they're awful. But they're a necessary function of the environment in order to maintain a heat balance on planet Earth. So these monster storms will form in the equator, in the tropics, and they take all of that hot air from the tropics and they pump it into the upper elevations of the overall atmosphere, where the hot air is then dispersed via the jet stream winds to the colder latitudes. So this is something we have to have in order to cool the planet down and maintain a temperature balance. They're also fascinating storms. When I was in college, I studied under one of the most brilliant satellite meteorologists of all time. And these are warm core storms. These are storms that are just absolute monsters. And to see one of these storms close up, I believe you're seeing an aspect of the face of God in terms of the sheer power and magnitude that the Lord can bring about. Again, deadly, yes. Sadly, we have, in too many cases, set up camp and cities and towns, etc., along precarious positions along the coast where, hurricanes are going to occur on a regular basis, from time to time. So we put ourselves in those situations. That's why we have insurance, so we can try to mitigate those disasters. But the loss of life is always a terrible thing. But hurricanes, you know what? Planet Earth has to have them.
Brian Sussman is with us today, who served many years as a meteorologist. He has authored a couple of books, Climategate, a veteran meteorologist exposes a global warming scam, and Eco-Tyranny, how the left's green agenda will dismantle America, both of which, by the way, are available at the VCY bookstore at 1-888-722-4829. Brian, one day after the election, just a week ago today, the Environmental Defense Fund president, Fred Krupp, was congratulating the president. He said he's expecting this president and the 113th Congress to make, quote, global climate change a top priority, and cites that climate change was a decisive factor in this election. Now, we see this economy of our nation in shambles. It's plummeting, record deficits. And this guy wants the president and Congress to focus on climate change legislation. Al Gore has joined this chorus as well, calling upon the president to use his new victory here to enact strong legislation on climate control. What's your response to this?
Well, it's interesting. They're claiming that this is on the mind of the people of the United States of America. Climate change never came up during the presidential debates once. This isn't an issue that Barack Obama ran on at all because he knows it's a losing issue. There are more and more people who are just becoming skeptics regarding human-induced climate change. Mitt Romney didn't even bring it up, other than to mention that, we need our coal fields opened. We need our coal plants running. We need fracking for natural gas, and we could use that oil as well so we're not slaves to OPEC. So I find it interesting, but not surprising, because the Environmental Defense Fund, listen, there are a lot of high-powered attorneys who make a living suing people, and so they need this to continue because it's a part of their own personal gravy train. There are others who are using this agenda to push us more towards a socialist model as opposed to a capitalist model. And I will tell you, you look at, as I've done in Eco-Tyranny, I really went back to the roots of the entire environmental movement because I wanted to know where this started. And it started in the mind of a brilliant writer and a very deep thinker named Karl Marx. And the plan that he put together was first implemented by the first dictator of Russia, Vladimir Lenin. Now, this sounds strong, folks, but this is all on the level. And keep in mind, what was Marx's original goal? When Marx was a young man in college, he was part of a group called the Young Hegelians. Their original goal was, quote, the liquidation of Christianity. You know, Karl Marx saw Christianity as bringing capitalism to the planet. Karl Marx didn't like the fact that Christians saw themselves as stewards of nature. He didn't like any of that. Karl Marx didn't like the fact that people could actually take a natural resource and sell it for a profit. He wanted to stop all of that. And so the environmental movement is in so many ways, by the absolute radicals at the top of the movement, it's their way to liquidate Christianity.
Well, I also found it interesting. You mentioned Karl Marx, and yet after the victory of Barack Obama at taking the presidency last week, here's a group of college students celebrating, yelling out that chant, Karl Marx, socialism, while celebrating this victory. And they saw on Obama victory as one that celebrated Karl Marx. Well,
you know, it's amazing. I spoke recently at the University of California, Berkeley. This was the home of the free speech movement in the 60s. And this is where Marxism is taught universally, virtually in every classroom. And I remember I was speaking to these kids, just giving them fact after fact after fact, like I'm sharing with your audience right here, and their jaws had dropped. These kids had been in school at UC Berkeley 3 or 4 years. They'd never heard any of this before. But what really was amazing, and it was actually quite disturbing, as I was speaking to these kids, I would bring up my book, Eco-Tyranny. I would say, well, I've got my book, Eco-Tyranny, and it's every time I mentioned something like, you know, it's become a bestseller or it's selling very well, there would be these disturbing laughs in the audience. And I couldn't figure out exactly what was happening. But you see, anytime I talked about making money off of a book, you know, selling a book, they saw that as me being a sellout to capitalism, and they equated that with the only reason why this guy writes books is so he can make money. And it was disturbing to see this level, this level of ideology in the classroom that really ridicules any form of capitalism whatsoever. And I'd never seen that face to face until I went to UC Berkeley. This is what's being taught on our college campuses on a regular basis. They ridicule capitalism. They think they've been taught to believe that free markets are somehow evil, and this nation needs to be more regulated, there need to be more laws, and there needs to be more government. These kids are growing up thinking that's the answer.
Yeah, unless it's the leftist publishers publishing their leftist books that promote radical environmentalism and related topics.
Exactly. So, you know, this is the thing that we have to remember, folks. I may be saying some things that sound rather radical here, but when you go in the college campuses today, when you go in the hallowed halls of government at all levels, you hear people talk like this, and they're very, very serious about this. They see Karl Marx as a guy who had some wonderful ideas. They just need to be implemented properly.
Brian Sussman is with us today. We're going to take a quick 60-second break, and afterwards we're going to talk about the new push that's going on, or a revised push, for a carbon tax to deal with our budget deficit, and also what's going on with the UN in climate change talks. And also we're going to be taking a look at this term ecocide. You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY America Network.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, creation seminar speaker with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, what does the Bible have to say about dinosaurs?
Chris, the Bible gives us a good bit of information about dinosaurs. Of course, it doesn't use the rather new term dinosaur, but it does use the term dragon for great reptilian beast. Some of their descriptions sound an awful lot like dinosaurs. These great beasts were created perfect in the beginning, but when Adam sinned, the whole creation was cursed, including the dinosaurs. Soon the whole world was destroyed by Noah's flood, yet 2 of each dinosaur kind were on board Noah's Ark. Most or all of them eventually went extinct, but there's a great deal of evidence that humans and dinosaurs lived together in fairly recent times. They weren't just imagined, they were real. We can piece together how to think about the dinosaurs only by starting back in Genesis.
For more on Genesis, visit our website at icr.org. This is Chris O'Brien. Thanks for going back to Genesis.
Well, many in the radical environmental positions are hailing the re-election of President Barack Obama as to what it will mean for their cause. We're speaking today with Brian Sussman, a meteorologist who served in San Francisco Bay for many years. He has studied this issue inside out. He's author of a couple of books, Climategate, where he exposes a global warming scam, and also Eco-Tyranny, taking a look at the left's green agenda and how this will dismantle America. Well, there are those, Brian, who are literally pushing the president, pushing the Congress. They say, okay, you've got this big deficit right now. How about instituting a carbon tax in order to help with this budget deficit, looking at all the money that will come in if such a carbon tax is instituted? This is rather frightening.
It is frightening, and look no farther than California, folks, because we began our carbon trade. Carbon credits are being traded for the first time today. Today's the day when carbon credits are being traded. We had a law signed by Arnold Schwarzenegger several years ago called AB 32. This is a law that requires California to lower its greenhouse gas emissions and institute a carbon trading scheme. And so the carbon trading scheme begins today. The law goes into effect January 1st. And just to explain to your listeners, Jim, how this works, because it is rather complex, but I can make it really, really simple. The state of California has determined how much carbon dioxide various industries are allowed to emit during the course of a year. And they look at those industries and then they break it down by business. So they would come to you if you're, for example, an oil refinery, or maybe you're an energy producer, or a cement manufacturer. Those are the three that we start off with here in California in 2013. Those are the three that are going to be regulated. Let's say, okay, Mr. Cement Maker, you guys are emitting all of this carbon dioxide every year, so this is your limit. You can't emit any more than that. And if you do, you're going to have to go to our carbon exchange and buy some carbon credits, which are going to be very, very expensive, and that'll be your punishment. The money from the carbon credits will then go into the state's coffers, and the state's going to take that money and they'll redistribute it, most likely giving it to poor people to pay for their utility bills, and perhaps even give them, instead of things like food stamps, they'll get gasoline stamps, etc. So what's going to happen with the cement manufacturer? It's either buy the carbon credit, get fined by the state, or buy some technology to reduce the amount of carbon that you're spewing into the atmosphere. No matter what you decide, it's going to cost you. So the cost of cement is going to go through the roof in California. Cement is necessary for building. It's necessary for development. So now the cost of all buildings, the cost of all development is going to go up notably because of the price of cement going up. They're doing the same thing with oil refineries, so you connect the dots. The price of gas is going to go through the roof. Diesel is going to go through the roof. And then they're also doing this with energy producers. So the price of energy in California, it's already the highest in the country. That's going to go even higher. And again, they'll use this money to, one, offset their huge deficits in the state of California, and they are monstrous. Don't be fooled, folks. We have an operating budget in the state of California of $90 billion annually. All told, we're $66 billion upside down right now. I'm wondering if Barack Obama is going to see this state as being too big to fail. And then the money will also be used for various social programs, various giveaways. So that's how it works. It's starting in California today. So just watch California and be prepared.
The redistribution of wealth before our very eyes.
Yes, that's exactly what this plan is. And when this plan was put together by the United Nations in 1992, because cap-and-trade started in the mind of a gentleman named Strong, Maurice Strong, and the United Nations, he put together their entire environmental plan beginning in the 80s. Was introduced in an agenda piece called Agenda 21, the agenda for the 21st century. Carbon trading was a part of that agenda, and it's been tried in Europe. It hasn't worked out very well. It's been tried in a number of places. It never seems to work. It doesn't reduce emissions at all. But we're going to try it in California, and let's just see how it works. It's not going to work at all, folks.
Well, let's bring Europe and the UN into the picture here, because a rather interesting observation going on. They were going to begin charging foreign airlines for greenhouse gases that they emitted during their flights to and from the European airspace. And there's been a lot of opposition to this, so now they're suspending that plan and instead giving the United Nations aviation body, the International Civil Aviation Organization, a year to hammer out a global agreement on dealing with the aviation sector's carbon dioxide emissions. But if the UN doesn't do this, they're going to resume their plan to charge these foreign airlines. The interesting thing that's going on there. Where does the UN get their authority to do stuff like this? And isn't this really an attack upon our own sovereignty?
Absolutely. Again, the UN has no power to do this. The U.S. airlines were all ready to line up and just go ahead and start charging their customers the fine, probably thinking, well, people in America will fall for this one. I just find it interesting that some of the loudest voices against this plan were countries like China and Russia and India saying, no, we're not going to be a part of this program. Forget it. We're not doing this. And it's interesting because those countries, I always tell the environmentalists this when I have disagreements and discussions and debates with them. I always say, okay, guys, we've done a wonderful job of cleaning up our pollution in the United States. I mean, you look at all of our air is cleaner now than it was in the 70s, and we have many more people, many more cars driving, et cetera. Our air, we're doing such a great job here. If you want to protest, why don't you go to China? They're putting a new coal plant in every week in China, and they're not using any technology to take the soot out of the skies. They're not doing any of that. They're doing the same thing in India. There are new coal plants going up all the time. There's no technology to clean the air. Same thing in Russia. If you've got a beef with people who are really polluting the planet right now, why don't you protest in these other countries? Because the problem isn't the United States. We're the answer. We're developing all of these wonderful technologies to make the world a cleaner place. But, again, why are they focusing on the United States? Why are all these environmentalists calling us out as the bad guys? It's because they don't like our capitalism. They don't like our freedom. They don't like our free markets. They don't like people being able to make decisions for themselves. That's really the crux of the matter.
Here's another UN issue. It is the former head of the UN's climate change talks. I believe it's Ivo de Boer.
Yes.
But he, and this is from these talks that happened in Copenhagen a couple years ago, said that the next United Nations climate report, which I believe is due out at the end of next year,
yes.
He said, quote, "It will scare the wits out of everyone." And then he said, "I'm confident those scientific findings will create new political momentum." Brian, I thought all this had been debunked at the UN level.
Yeah, that's really disturbing. And again, it has been debunked, but they keep coming up with new studies, and these studies. It's as if they're trying to prove something. So they'll take a theory and then they'll try to prove the theory. In terms of the scientific method, the way that we used to be taught when I was in grade school and junior high is you come up with your theory, your hypothesis and your theory, and then you test the heck out of it. You just try to beat that theory up to a pulp. Try to poke holes in it, try to disprove it. But what we see so often with so much of the research and some of these studies that are being conducted in our various hallowed halls of academia, as well as the think tanks and those who are working with the United Nations, they have their theory, and now it's all about proving the theory. And so by proving their theory, they come up with these scary scenarios, and that's pretty much what we have right now. They're using these studies, this research, which is heavily biased, in order to scare us into submission and make us believe that, again, capitalism and free markets are the problem. We need to change this. We need to move to a new paradigm.
Well, talking about being scary, there's this new term that's been coined by radical environmentalists called ecocide, which they believe should be prosecuted in the same way as the horrors of genocide and ethnic cleansing. LifeNews.com shared this story as the official definition of ecocide as being this: the extensive damage to, destruction of, or loss of ecosystems of a given territory, whether by human agency or by other causes, to such an extent that peaceful enjoyment by the inhabitants of that territory has been or will be severely diminished. Now, this is to include everything from grass to fish to insects to mice, snakes, and people. I mean, they're elevating the exploitation of resources to an evil equivalent to the Holocaust. Have you heard this term before?
Yes. The first time that term was used, to my knowledge, was in 1969 when things were really changing in the United States of America and the environmental movement was just about to really take off. This was a year before Earth Day, as you'll remember. And that's when the term ecocide was first used. Now let's go back now to the early 1900s. There was a disciple of Karl Marx who first coined the term ecology. I mean, this guy was a student of Marx. He knew Marx. I denoted it at length in the book Eco-Tyranny. He was the one who came up with the word ecology, and he did it because he needed a word to somehow use to describe how humans were destroying the planet. So he came up with this word ecology. Now from that we have the word ecosystem. I think an ecosystem can be something as small as a puddle in your backyard to the entire globe. So this is a term that's so relative, and when they use this, again, they're using it as a scare tactic to make us believe that humans have the capacity to destroy the entire world, hence ecocide.
What's alarming to this, too, is just to see these issues spilling over into the religious community. Last week, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, there was a number of Catholic scholars, U.S. bishops, and Catholic leaders from the Washington region that met to discuss the moral and religious implications of global climate change and environmental justice. Is that rather alarming to you?
Well, this began, again, this was a United Nations plan that started in the 80s and was first rolled out in 1991. Mikhail Gorbachev became a part of this plan. Al Gore became a part of this plan. And again, I detail this in the book Eco-Tyranny as well. And it was also something that people like Carl Sagan, the astronomer who was, an avowed atheist, and others got involved in. They thought, if we can take this environmental message and get it implemented into the churches, we'll do two things. One, they will be our foot soldiers to mainstream the environmental movement. Two, we can also get them away from this, this God stuff. We can kind of water down the God stuff. And so this has been, a well-funded, a well-concerted effort. And what really bothers me, Jim, I look at, some of our Christian schools in America, as well as some of our esteemed evangelical colleges, and this stuff is being taught, even on those campuses. And it really disturbs me because they've decided to pitch science for something based on emotion, and what they don't understand is really it's flying in the face of a lot of godly principles that are founded in truth and fact and science.
Folks, we'd like you to get on board here to speak with our guest today. Maybe you have a question, a comment, whether it relates to Hurricane Sandy, whether it relates to the renewed push for these carbon taxes and legislation for global climate change type legislation. Our number to crosstalk, 800-733-9829, 1-800-733-9829. A quick break, and when we come back from the break, we'll find out from our guest, what can we do? What can listeners to Crosstalk do on this important issue? Our number here again is 800-733-9829. Get on board with your question and comments today with Brian Sussman, our guest on Crosstalk.
A new feature-length film is now available on DVD. Amazing Love is the story about a youth director and his wife who take 5 teens from their youth group to the wilderness for 2 nights to camp out. 2 teen girls have a sharp argument that causes division. Tensions are high. The youth leader gathers all the kids and decides to tell the story of Hosea. Using flashback, the film takes you to Nazareth as the story of Hosea unfolds. It's a story of commitment, of keeping vows before God, of faithfulness and unconditional love. Through November 17th, Crosstalk is making available 1 copy of Amazing Love for a donation of $18, and any additional copies to the same address for a donation of $10 each.
2 copies are available for $28, 3 copies for $38, and so on. The story will impact teens and adults alike. To obtain your copies of Amazing Love, visit vcyamerica.org or call 1-800-729-9829. 1-800-729-9829.
Again, our number to crosstalk is 800-733-9829. We're speaking today with Brian Sussman as we talk about this renewed push for climate control in the wake of Hurricane Sandy, in the wake of an Obama victory. And there are those who are saying you now have the mandate from the people to push for global warming, global climate change legislation. You have the mandate to push forward an agenda that's going to bring in these carbon taxes and a mandate to alter, our full way in which we do industry here in the nation. Brian, there are those who wonder, okay, there are those pushing this. What can I, as an average citizen, do across this nation to stem the tide as to this radical push that's going on?
Yes, it's really no different than what we would tell the brand new Christian. Someone who just has a revelation, and for the first time in their life, they really understand what God has done for them. And you tell that young person, hey, listen, what you really need to do is get yourself grounded in the Scriptures. You really need to study the Word of God, and you need to allow that Word to transform your mind. And it's the same thing in this particular area, because we're talking about the truth here, folks. We're talking about right versus wrong, good versus evil, and we're talking about real science versus junk science. So I would encourage your listeners, Jim, to find some of the wonderful books that have been written on this topic and absorb this information and really allow these books to transform your mind so you understand exactly where the plumb line is. And then you can go out there and fight the battles accordingly and better articulate your beliefs to those who may be skeptics or may be in complete denial. That's where I would start. And, it's not just my books, Jim. There are so many wonderful authors who have worked so hard to get the word out on this. And I would also like to tell you that so many of these people who have written so many of these books, I meet these men and women at conferences. They're people of faith. They love this. They love this planet. They don't worship the planet. They love this planet. They want clean air and clean water. They want to be good stewards of what God has given to us, and they're trying their hardest to get the word out. And I'm just one of those many voices.
So, is there a way to actually balance this aspect of being a good steward and at the same time have dominion?
Yes, absolutely. Because let's look, for example, when you talk about what the president has done via the oil industry, there is so much oil underneath our own soil that if we ever decided to tap it, the Saudis would have a conniption fit because they would understand we could destroy their market share big time. We could have cheaper oil, we could have cheaper gas, we could have cheaper energy all around because God's given us these wonderful resources in the United States of America. We are resource rich, but again, these people on the other side don't believe anyone has a right to make a profit off of a resource. Now, I'll give you a case in point. This is why Barack Obama's Import-Export Bank has given billions of dollars for oil exploration to places like Brazil and Mexico, telling even the people in Brazil, hey, when you build this oil manufacturing plant, we'll be the very first in line to be your customer. Why is he saying that? It's because Brazil's oil and Mexico's oil is owned by the state. There are no profits. The money goes back to the people. You see, that's good oil. But anyone making a profit off of oil, that's bad oil. But, again, you look at what this administration's done in terms of killing jobs in the oil industry. They've knocked us back a decade. You look at what they've done in terms of the natural gas industry. They're trying to destroy that by saying fracking, which is something we've been doing for decades, is suddenly evil. You look at what they've done even in the nuclear industry. They've done things that have pushed the nuclear power industry back a decade or more. Coal, they're trying to shut down the coal industry altogether. That's not just thousands upon thousands of jobs, but that's, again, a cheap energy resource, which, by the way, can burn very, very clean thanks to the wonderful technology that's been invented in the United States. So we must be informed. We must be diligent. We can't let these people dictate to us how we shall live because we can live in harmony with nature. We have the technology, and again, we have shown that we can do this properly.
Let's go to the phone lines, which are packed here from calls across the nation. We're going to begin in Medford, Oregon. Alex, you're on the air.
Yes, sir. I've got a book in my hand entitled The Unseen Hand by A. Ralph Epperson. Is your guest familiar with it?
I'm not familiar with that one, and I'm sorry that I'm not, because it's a very intriguing title for certain.
Oh, it most certainly is, sir. I don't wish to be argumentative or anything, but it talks about climate control and weather control on pages 344 and 345.
Well, I will tell you, let's talk about that for just a moment, Jim. As a meteorologist, he's getting into something called geoengineering, and this is something that meteorologists have been doing in this country and around the world for years. Geoengineering is actually altering the weather, cloud seeding. It's plain and simple, cloud seeding. We've done that sometimes good and sometimes disastrously here in the United States, causing massive flash flooding, hailstorms, etc. So we have done this in the past. It's something we know has been done. We know that during the last Olympics in Beijing, in order to clear out all of the horrendous smog, because they don't care about polluting the planet there, in order to clear out the tremendous smog, they were seeding the clouds in order to wash the smoke and soot out of the sky. So this is something that's very, very real and something that has been done off and on for years, even in the United States.
Okay. It talks about here electromagnetic radiation and its application in the spheres of weather modification.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it was started in 1974, and by 1976 they had ground-based transmitters in Russia.
Right. No, I am very familiar with that, and it's probably a little too deep to go into in this program. But this is all real. It's all being done. There's no question about it. The question is, how effective is it on the macro scale as opposed to the micro scale?
Alex, thanks for the call. Next to Port Charlotte, Florida. And Heidi, you're on the air.
Yes, I just want to say thank you to Brian for being a voice of truth in a very upside-down, uneducated America. I read a book about 7 or 8 years ago when I was first introduced to Karl Marx, and my jaw dropped with the amount of evil that seeped from that man. And I just am totally surprised about how our country has slowly grasped onto him and called him a savior even in his policies, and it's just mind-boggling. And I just wanted to say thank you and for being a truth speaker, and I love this program. I listen to it every day. And also, I'm very frustrated with my friends and family that think that I'm crazy when I try and tell them the truth about global warming and climate control and the policies that are being made by the UN and by our government. And how can I respond to their skepticism? And I'll take my answer off the air. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Again, just to get loaded up on the facts is a good thing, and if you guys would like, you can go to any one of my websites, Jim, and I've got a current video up of I think I mentioned that UC Berkeley speech that I gave. I've got a 5-minute highlight reel of just facts, and these are all things that when you're confronted by the facts, you just don't know where to go because you can't argue the truth against the truth. So we need to be armed and ready, and we need to be well-versed in this because, folks, this is the topic of the day. I want you to be rooted in your faith, and I want you to be armed with the gospel. But at the same time, this is the big issue that they're trying to foist upon us to change the way in which we live and, quite frankly, destroy freedom.
Brian, what is the website?
Well, you could just go to my website, briansussman.com, and that'll lead you to all of my various websites where I have my environmental blogs, etc. And that video, if you, again, Jim, any of the information you guys want to take from that, you guys can use. I give you permission.
Right.
And I'm going to be putting together a new blog here shortly because I want to show people what Obama is going to do during this next term and based upon what he's done during his past term. But, everyone is very concerned, as they should be, because, again, this isn't about clean air and clean water, folks. This is about gaining control over our lives.
That's BrianSussman.com.
Yes, sir.
Sussman is spelled Sussman.
Correct.
And Brian is with an I, Brian. So
yes.
BrianSussman.com. Let's go next to Chicago, Illinois. And Trinity, you're on the air.
Hello. I want to talk about climate change. I don't agree with a lot that liberals have to say their stances on anything. But, however, in Revelations chapter 16, verses 8 and 9, it actually speaks of climate change. And it says that the fourth angel poured out his vial and men were...
Yeah, that's talking about future judgment to take place, Trinity.
That's correct. And it says that men will be scorched with great heat, which is actually the global warming. So I just ask that your listeners read the Bible and the book of Revelation, and I thank you so much for taking my call.
Thank you. And let me say, I believe that would be more global warning than global warming.
And again, those are acts of God.
Right.
Come as judgment in the future. In the meantime, I just don't believe humankind is capable of making those kind of alterations to this massive planet on which we live. Next to Jerry in Milwaukee. You're on the air, Jerry.
Yeah, I'm a truck driver. I was listening to another radio station in Ohio, Cincinnati, and they were talking about, I wonder if your guest or if you, Jim, are familiar with www.regulations.gov. It says this Obama administration applies 68 new regulations per day.
Right.
This is insane.
Yeah, I think it's something like 6,800 in the last 90 days. It's the amount of regulations. And again, why the regulations? Why the new laws? It's to constrict our freedom. You look, for example,
and many of these are coming from the EPA.
Yeah, the EPA and across the board, the Obama administration, they're using just every agency possible to create new laws. We need fewer laws. We need fewer regulations in order to experience more liberty, I believe.
Yeah, was that ever talked about during the debates?
No.
I mean, I think that would have woke American people up if they would have heard that and they would have said, "What?"
Yeah.
Well, again, there's so many things that could have been mentioned. Getting back to the root of this, Jim, when you look at people, and a couple of these callers now have alluded to Marx, there's something about Marx's message that rings with certain ears. One of the things Marx believed, and again, he was an atheist, he did not believe that humankind was special in any way, shape, or form, that we're made in the image of God to him was just a ridiculous statement. But Marx was a materialist. Marx believed that, Jim, you and me, all your listeners, we're basically the same as a redwood tree or even a banana slug. The only difference is the material in our bodies, the atoms and molecules, just arranged differently. We may be a little more complex, but we're all basically the same. So that's what Marx believed, and that's what so many believe today in the environmental movement. They believe that humans, trees, banana slugs, weeds, they're all the same. That's why they want to protect these various species, and in fact, it's gotten to the point now where they want to look upon mankind in an unfavorable way and start to discriminate against mankind because humans are the only species, they say, that can destroy all the others. So that rings true to a lot. That just rings in a special way to a lot of these radicals who don't believe in God and believe, yeah, well, sure, right, we're all the same. There's nothing special about humans. There's no heaven. There's no hell. It doesn't really matter. We're all basically going to the same place. That's where this mentality begins. We're going to take a quick break. Rick in Florida, hang on. You'll be our next caller, and we'll pick up other calls as well here at 800-733-9829. You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY America Network.
For the Worldview Weekend Minute, I'm Brandon House. Our website is worldviewweekend.com. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 12 says, "All who desire to live godly in Christ Jesus will suffer persecution." It doesn't say maybe, it doesn't say might, it says they will suffer persecution. My question today for you and for myself is, Are we experiencing at least soft persecution? Now, we know that in Cuba and in China, there is hard persecution going on for many who really are believers in Jesus Christ. But for us here in our comfortable country, we certainly should be at least experiencing soft persecution, where people are speaking ill of us or calling us narrow-minded or bigoted or judgmental because we stand for the inerrancy of Scripture, the exclusivity of Jesus Christ. Are you standing up for the gospel in your everyday life to the point that you are receiving soft persecution? I pray that you are, because it means you're contending for the faith. For Worldview Week in Minute, I'm Brandon House.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. We're speaking with Brian Sussman today about this renewed push that's going on for climate control and climate control legislation. By the way, his two books, Climategate and also Eco-Tyranny, are available through our VCY bookstore, 1-888-722-4829. You can also get a lot of information on his website, briansussman.com. Well, let's see. Holding forever has been Rick in Navarre, Florida. Rick, go ahead. You're on the air with Brian Sussman.
Yeah, good afternoon, Jim and Brian. Now that the Democrats have been reelected, the global warming hoaxers are back in the saddle, and they're after our wallets. This whole global warming hoax is simply an attempt to pick our pockets, with the objective being to render us powerless. A penniless person is a powerless person. But okay, to my question. For many years, I've been following the progress of the long-term research project analyzing the Greenland ice cores. Most of the analysis has been complete. It conclusively shows we're in a long-term global cooling period stretching at least back 300,000, 400,000 years. Why isn't this brought up as proof positive that global warming is a hoax?
And not only that, and that's an excellent point, those ice cores also show us that there was a time when the CO2 levels on the planet were many times what they are today, once again proving that CO2 is a variable gas. So you're correct. You bring this stuff up, and then you'll get someone at the United Nations who will just decide to pan the report altogether, although what you've just cited has actually been included at one point in one of the United Nations IPCC reports. It was included in just a line or two, but again, it's surrounded on other sides of the paragraph with absolute bunk. Listen, we're in an uphill battle. This is a battle for the truth. And the other side, because oftentimes they don't have any moral underpinnings, there's no moral compass within their soul, they decide that the end justifies the means. They will look you in the eye. They will lie right through their teeth with a smile on their face, and they'll say, I'm right, you're wrong. It's hard to combat that in the public arena without having the time to really detail your point of view. That's why, I'll write a book, 200 or 300 pages to try to get my point across and make my argument.
Appreciate the call here.
Yeah.
The only thing that we're not going to get in here today, challenge you on the hundreds of thousands of years or whatever, but check out answersingenesis.com or .org. He talked about this hoax, and we had Senator James Inhofe, who also wrote a book on the greatest hoax in this regard here, too, and indeed is a hoax. Let's go to Pensacola next, and Michael, you're on the air.
Yes, sir. I think you talked about it a little bit already, but I'll just let you expound on it a little bit. We have an abundance of coal in the United States, and I know there's ways of cleaning it and making it burn more efficiently. How difficult is that to do that?
It's a great point. We have so much coal, and it's just a wonderful resource, and something I always like to say that shocks my detractors. Coal saved the forests. There was a time when we were using wood to heat our homes and our stoves, et cetera, in this country, and we were at risk of clearing out all the forests. Suddenly we discover coal. Boy, this little black rock. You just put it right there and light it, and wow, look at the warmth. Coal saved the forests. Coal can be incredibly dirty, but there are different grades of coal, some cleaner than others. But with modern technologies, which we're all able to employ, and we do employ, coals can be, very, very clean energy facilities. So because we've been able to clean up the bona fide pollution from the coal plant, what do? They invent a new pollutant, one you can't see, you can't touch, you can't taste, you can't see, or you can't smell. It's called carbon dioxide. And so this is the little game they've been able to play with us. Natural gas is a very clean-burning fossil fuel. However, it does emit carbon dioxide. So there you go. You can't see it, touch it, taste it, or smell it, but emits it. So now that's bad. And you can go right on down the line. We've done a great job cleaning up the pollution in our world. They came up with a new pollutant, which isn't a pollutant at all. It's called CO2. It's a fertilizer. God gave it to us for a reason. It's necessary for all life.
Thank you, Michael. To Christine in West Bend, you're on the air.
Yes, I've been following a man by the name of Dutch Sense, and he's talking about the weather modification. And as I follow him, I see some significant, what I can tell as a human, proof that they may be altering the weather to bring us into a state of fear so that they can proceed with their agendas. And I'm wondering, how do you sort through these things and find out what is really accurate? I know you've got books, but I just saw some satellite footage from Dutch Sense.
We'll have them. How do we discern truth in this regard, Brian?
Yes, we discern truth by remembering that there are laws of physics that can't be denied. There is research that can't be denied. And when you start to look, for example, at what humans can do and can't do, we don't have the power. Though we like to, the whole global warming, the anthropogenic global warming theory is very, very arrogant to think that we can actually do this to the planet, to think that we're actually bigger than God and can actually change the weather in a negative way that could actually destroy all species. Ecocide, as you were talking about earlier, to me, is just absolute folly. And again, it does fly in the face of God himself. But yeah.
I was just going to say, we're going to try and squeeze one last call in.
Please.
Fred in Milwaukee, you're on the air.
Yes, thank you. In yesterday's Journal Sentinel, they had an article from Bloomberg News that the U.S. is going to be the largest oil producer for the next 10 to 15 years until our Lord return in 2030. But they're saying that we're producing more oil, yet our prices are through the roof, and it's probably because of the tax.
First of all, friend, I'm going to dispute the year of the Lord's return. No man knows that date here. But what about, we have about 30 seconds here, Brian, what about the oil producing here for the U.S.?
This is a masterful propaganda campaign being put forward by this administration and others. There is wonderful gas and oil exploration taking place on private lands. Sadly, what's being done on our federal lands is pathetic. It's knocked us backward, and hopefully that's going to change as more and more people cry out to this administration saying, we want our oil, we want our gas, and we want it cheaper.
BrianSussman.com is the website. And Brian, thank you for carving some time out of your schedule to help inform all of us here better on this area of climate control and climate change.
Always a pleasure, and I look forward to it again, Jim.
Our guest, Brian Sussman, he is author of the books Eco-Tyranny and also that of Climategate. Check out the website, BrianSussman.com. Folks, thanks for joining us today on Crosstalk.
Listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.